the Jewish Historical Society's archive as we go on. And I'll ask people who aren't speaking to stay muted just so we don't get too much background noise. But if, you know, if you need something, you can send me a chat or raise your hand and I'll be looking out for you, okay? I think if Noit doesn't mind going first, we can go in alphabetical order. Is that okay, Noit? Yeah, okay. I'm trying to unmute you. Hold on. I'm gonna unmute everybody for a sec. Okay. So many of you know each other from the Jewish Historical Society. Many of you probably may not know Noit, but she is a good friend of mine and my daughter's Hebrew teacher. And she graciously agreed to join us tonight to share a story from the kibbutz where she grew up in Israel. So, Noit, it's yours.
Yeah. So, shalom everyone, and thank you, Beth, a lot for this opportunity to share my story. And before I start the story, I just have to tell everyone how much, not just fun, but real joy, real deep joy I had from just listening to all of you. You guys are like real kibbutz. And it's so beautiful to see how people know people and people joke and they know each other, neighbors and whatnot. So, and it's just warmed my heart. So thank you everyone for welcoming me like that. I was born and raised in Kibbutz Yagur in Israel, which is about 20 minutes away from Haifa, and it's just down the Mount Carmel. The kibbutz was established in 1922 by 9 members who bought the land. They did not take anything that is not theirs. They bought the land, and the goal was to create a place that would be, among other places, become a homeland for the Jewish people. I should say also for the Jewish people, not just for the Jewish people. My grandpa and my grandmother joined later to the kibbutz, and my father and my aunt were born there, and I was born there. And it was beautiful. It was just beautiful growing up in a kibbutz and celebrating holidays with everyone. There was only one party that everybody went to, and it was really beautiful. We were a community of farmers. We worked the land, and our most income came from cotton. I had wonderful, wonderful memories. I still have them from cotton fields, but that's a whole different story. And as farmers, for us, Rosh Hashanah is not just a holiday. It's not 2 days that we celebrate. Rosh Hashanah is actually a season. And that season starts with looking out for nature. And the things that we were looking were repeating themselves every year. And it was just, it's just fantastic to get connected to nature within preparation for the holiday. So one of the things that we used to do is to look for a special flower that in Hebrew is called chatzav. And there is so many studies about this name and this flower. I'm not going to get into that. In English, I believe it's Drimia, D as in David, R-I, M as in Mary, I-A. And the one thing about that flower is that it's built out of many, many flowers that go up together. And it's a very communal type of flower. The first kid who would spot the flower would get a candy. So needless to say that all the kibbutz kids were looking for that flower probably from the beginning of the summer, but it only comes out around the beginning of August, maybe mid-August. Second thing that we noticed as the season of Rosh Hashanah kicked in was taking place in the beehives. Yagur had a beehives, and we all were going there and studied the bees, and the lucky kid got bit by a bee because it was believed that bee sting is a vaccine against a certain joint infection, and you would get a candy for getting sting. Third was to look at for the cotton. So as kids, we had a very, very important job when it was time to pick up the cotton. That is the season where the cotton flower is ready to be picked. And we had to jump over those huge piles of cotton in order to tighten them before they being wrapped and shipped to the factory. That was tons of fun. Last but definitely not least, that was the season where we got new clothes. So we were not shopping like whenever we felt like it. We were getting new clothes twice a year. We were getting new clothes on Rosh Hashanah. That would be the clothes for fall and winter. And then we were getting new clothes on Passover. That were the clothes for spring and summer. During that season, that was, as you can tell, a much fun season, we did have a big worry. And the worry was about the arrival of the rain. We were really scared for the rain to come too early. If it comes too early, then it hurts the quality of the cotton. And then the price drops, and I don't need to explain more about that. So that worry was always there. I grew up during the era where kids did sleep in the children's house. And if you ask me, a fantastic era. My childhood was full of fantastic stories about that. And in the kibbutz, because the children were sleeping in the children's house, the young kids were not invited to the service, to the Rosh Hashanah service, or to many other holidays, to be honest. And the services would start at around 9 p.m. The kids were already at the children's house, and the parents and grandparents and everybody else would go to have the service. Rosh Hashanah service was always held outside. That's why I'm sitting outside right now in honor of that. And it was built with tons, but really tons of dances and singing along, a lot of songs for peace and for season stuff and whatnot, beautiful songs. And also 3 speeches. There were 3 speeches that were given every service of Rosh Hashanah. And those 3 speeches were given by the first one. It's always the same order. So the first one was by the kibbutz secretary, the head of the kibbutz, and he or she would give like its blessing to the members and a little bit of a view of their past year and the hope for the new year. The second speech was given by someone who was just joined as a member, as a new member to the community. And the third speech was given by the older person of the community. So I was 6 years old when I was allowed to attend the first Rosh Hashanah service, the kibbutz service. And I was very excited. I was very excited because I felt like I'm out to be extremely honored. And that is because my parents just got married. So that's a little weird because I was already 6 and they just got married. What happened was my biological mother left when I was almost 2 years old. And then my dad met my mom when I was 4. They got married when I was 6, and she joined the kibbutz when I was 6. And she was chosen that Rosh Hashanah service to give the speech as someone who just joined the kibbutz. So here I am. My dad held me on his shoulders the entire service, and the dancing is going, and the singing is going, and the secretary of the kibbutz giving his speech. And of course, I don't pay attention to any of it. I'm just waiting for my new mom to come up on stage. And I actually felt cool to be a kid for a divorced parents, which wasn't very common back then, at least not in the kibbutz. And all of a sudden, it's a big, big honor. And now it's my mom's turn to go to the bima. Her name is being called up, and she is, sure enough, stepping into the bima. And as she takes her first step, it started to rain. And you could feel the energy shifted from excitement and happiness and joy and whatnot into what is going to happen. And people are now whispering, and I look at my mom, and she, as if the raindrops did not touch her, she keeps walking right there to the bima. And she comes up and she stands there, and she's standing in front of the microphone, and she's very quiet. And the more quiet she gets, the more quiet the crowd gets. My mom was an expert in running a crowd. And when I say a crowd, there were probably like anything between 900 to 1,100 people. And when everybody got silence, she says, as long as we stand here together, as long as we hope for good, the rain will stop. And I was 6 years old on my dad's shoulders, watching my mom taking the spirit that was dropping back to rise. And I watched the rain stopped. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuit. That's wonderful. Wonderful to share with us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Could I ask Leon committees to follow?
B'Rosh Hashanah Yekatevun, Uv'yom Tzom Kippur Yechatemum. On Rosh Hashanah it is inscribed, and on the fast of Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many will pass away, and how many shall be born? Who shall live, and who shall die? Who shall perish by fire, who by hunger, and who by plague? Who shall be allowed to stay, and who will be forced to wander? Every high holiday, when I hear these ominous words from the Utanitokev prayer, my mind wanders back some 80 years to the only time that I remember accompanying my mother alone to synagogue on the high holidays. The year was 1940. And I was a little over 5 years of age. We lived with my paternal grandparents in the small town of Shterzhets, then under Russian occupation, and now, today, it is known as Shteretz and is part of Western Ukraine. The Soviet administration did not recognize religious holidays, and my older brother had to attend school. I remember my pious mother agonizing over this, but not being able to do anything about it, carefully bandaged my brother's right hand. He was instructed to tell the teacher that he had injured his hand. If he had to desecrate the Yom Tov by attending school, he would at least not desecrate it also by writing. My father was working in a nearby town and was also not allowed to take off from work for the holiday. Those were the circumstances that gave me the rare pleasure of being alone with my mother in the women's section of the synagogue in our small town. My grandfather, tall, distinguished, with a long graying beard, was wrapped in a talit over his head and was leading services. I spent most of the time fidgeting and playing with my mother's glasses, which fascinated me and which I remember well because they folded into a monocle. Suddenly, everyone rose. The ark was opened, and as I looked around, I heard sobs from every corner. These prophetic words, which in other years were only theoretical, had this year taken on a stark and terrifying reality. Every day when we gathered around the table for our main meal, we heard the adults talking about the previous night's raids. Politicians, small business people, intellectuals, community leaders, and anyone considered an enemy by the communist state was rounded up and deported to Siberia or to one of the other Asian Soviet republics. Recent studies document that a total of 330,000 people, including about 70,000 Jews from our area, were deported. At the time, this was of course considered a great tragedy, but as we know, everything is relative. After the German invasion of our region, less than a year later, we realized that those who were deported with such anguish and fear would be almost the only Jews from our region to survive the war. How many will pass away? And how many shall be born? Who shall live and who shall die? Who shall be allowed to stay and who will be forced to wander? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Proceeding in alphabetical order, could I ask Barbara Gordon to go next? Barbara, can you hear me? Here, but it might be missing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. I was saying those are two very hard acts to follow.
They are, yes.
I guess my life was a little more normal. I was very touched by Leon's words and very excited. I can't remember her name, the young woman from Israel. I took my first trip to Israel at the age of 83. And I was set to go. Oh my God, I fell in love like you would not believe. I remember every single moment there. I was supposed to go back in March, and instead I've been locked up since March 9th. Haven't gone out of my house.
Yeah.
But I did grow up in Hartford. I'm one of the, I guess, average Hartford, Weaver High School, Emmanuel Synagogue people. It was great though. We had no problems. I started out by going with my family, of course, to the Good Sachim, and then most of my friends were going to Emmanuel. So I talked my parents into joining Emmanuel, but we were in the overflow at Weaver High School. And it's funny, the crazy things you remember, aside from the religious aspect, but I remember I was sitting in front of a young gentleman from Trinity College, and I was only in high school. And he actually asked me for a date during a Rosh Hashanah service. And we dated for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And that was the end of that. But I do remember that. And then we eventually, we moved to, we were on Westbourne Parkway and always walked to the synagogue on Greenfield Street. Obviously, like everybody else, we hung out at Keeney Park during the recess. I had an aunt and uncle who lived on Lenox Street. So we also went over there and had lunch on Rosh Hashanah. I remember a lot of the guys had transistor then radios, and they were always sneaking to listen to the World Series, which always wound up on the holiday. And then we moved to West Hartford, joined the Beth David, also were able to walk to the synagogue. But then my daughter moved to Colchester. And even though my parents were living in the same 2-family house with us, there came a time when I really wanted to be with an expanded family. The kibbutz sounds wonderful to me. So I decided I kind of weighed things and I thought, family's so important. So we actually joined the Ahavith Achim Synagogue in Colchester. Very small congregation, very, very close, extremely enjoyable services. I still belong there, as a matter of fact, and they are having 50 people, but I still can't do that. That's dangerous, so I will sit home and read the book from cover to cover, and probably in a crazy way get more out of the holiday, because you know how it is, and we women can admit to this. You're looking around to see what everyone's wearing and who's dating whom and that kind of thing. So when I read the book, and I did this many times when my husband was in the nursing home and the hospital, and I didn't want to leave him, so I simply sat and read the entire book for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that is what I will be doing. It's very sad to me not to be cooking a big meal. I always had my family for a big pre-Rosh Hashanah meal. And today, I couldn't help it. I ordered a taglock from the Crown, even though it's going to be awful for me to eat by myself. But there are certain traditions for these holidays that I so strongly believe in passing on to the next generation. I think we have to do it. Plus, it's enjoyable. So my life has not been that exciting, but the traditions will never leave me, and I hope I am passing them on. So thank you for asking me to say a couple of words.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next, I think we have Arthur Nassau. Let me get you unmuted.
I think I am unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Well, I grew up in Hartford in the North End, next to very near the Emmanuel. We had a home on Canterbury Street, and Canterbury Street was about a block from the Emmanuel. It was about a block from Keeney Park, and right 3 doors away was Weaver High School. So when I was in the mid 40s to the mid 50s, at 10 years old, I remember not being able to go to the services with my parents on the high holy days because they had a pew in the sanctuary in the Emmanuel, and they could listen to Arthur Corrett and Rabbi Silverman, where I sat in Weaver High School. And at the break, we would go into Keeney Park. And Keeney Park became a meeting place for all the teenagers, college kids, Hartford, West Hartford, and it became a tradition every year. I'm not sure how long that went on, but it certainly was many, many years that was the great meeting place. Now, my memories of Yom Kippur really revolve about breaking the fast. And before I talk about that, I got to go back because Leon's talk sort of brought back so much. My grandfather came to this country in 1910 or so, and he sent for his 8 children and wife 2 years later. He taught Hebrew in a cheder in Hartford. And the brothers, there were 7 brothers, and 5 of them settled in Hartford. So every year at Yom Kippur, to break the fast, I would see my uncles and my aunts, and we would have a reunion maybe once or twice a year because Passover was another one. And the brothers were all just so wonderful. And of course, my Uncle Isaac was 15 when he came to this country, and he studied the Talmud in Poland. And he was quite a scholar, so he would lead services. That's really Passover, but I just had to get that in. My dad was 3 months old when he came here, and his brothers, Isaac and oh my goodness, I don't want to miss anybody, but Isaac and Aaron, Joseph, Sam, and my dad, Louis, all settled in Hartford. 2 other brothers were in New York and New Jersey, and his sister was in Somers, Connecticut. This family on a Hebrew teacher's salary had 4 people go to Yale Law School, 1 go to dental school, 2 formed very successful businesses. It is so amazing to me to think of what would have happened if my grandfather, Morris Nassau, had stayed in this little town and been there as Leon's family was. So it's just amazing to me. But at any rate, breaking the fast became an occasion to see all of my uncles and my aunts, to have the warmth of family. My dad would go to Nilla service every year, and sometimes I would go with him, but his brothers went. And we would all be waiting back on Canterbury Street for the men to come back so we could eat. And when they came back, of course, we started with the orange juice, and then the kugels and the lox, and it was just a spread that was just so wonderful. I sent an email to my cousins about this meeting, and my cousin Sybil, whose father was Aaron, sent me a note. I just want to read the note because it really sums things up. I remember your mom's kugel, my mom's sour cream coffee cake, the platters of lox, whitefish, herring, native tomatoes from their garden. Most of all, I remember the feeling of love, feeling so safe and secure, surrounded by family and the fun we had as kids in that back room. That home on Canterbury Street was the gathering place. It represented everything good about our family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Art. It's lovely. Okay, I'm not sure if Elliot Pollock is here. He was also planning to speak, but I don't think I've seen him here tonight. So, is there anyone else who would like to share a story? I'm going to unmute everybody for a moment. I wonder if anyone else has memories or stories of the gatherings in Keeney Park. That seems to be something that comes up a lot in many of the interviews that the Jewish Historical Society did over the years.
I can
There were
talk
always
a little
people.
bit. Oh, I'm sorry.
You go on.
So my name is Audrey Yanofsky. My maiden name was Alster. I grew up on Colebrook Street in Hartford in the North End. And on Blue Hills Avenue was the Young Israel Synagogue. My parents were members of the Young Israel Synagogue. I was born in 1959, so I think I'm like the youngest one here from everybody. So I wasn't really old enough to remember everything, but I do remember going to shul every Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with my mother, walking up the street from Colebrook Street to Blue Hills Avenue. And on the corner was the mikveh. It used to be a 2-family house, and it was right on the corner. And so when I'd go to services for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, well, Rosh Hashanah with my mother and my brother, of course, I think it was Barbara who was saying, we sat, women and men sat separated, and we sat sort of like in the balcony, I guess you could call it. And everybody, all the women were, and all the kids, all the girls were all dressed up so pretty. Everybody had their hair done so nice. And you'd sit in the section, and that's all you'd hear is all these women talking about, oh, did you see that woman? She got this new hat. Oh, you see that lady? She's got this new dress. You see that woman? She's got her new diamond ring. And then they would talk about how they vacationed over the summertime somewhere, whatever. But it just cracked me up. And then we call ourselves the Shul Hoppers because my parents belonged in Israel until they moved to West Hartford. My parents didn't move to West Hartford. So my mother's best friend was Rebbitzin Zawicka. I don't even know if anybody knows the name of Zawicka. Well, Rabbi Zawicka was the rabbi of the Hebrew home, which was on Tower Avenue. So we used to walk from Colebrook Street to Tower Avenue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because my mother's friend and the rabbi, were leading the service. He was leading the service. And I remember that was like one of the first times, I don't know why, because Young Israel was an Orthodox synagogue, but it was like one of the first times I remember they had a cantor who, you're wearing it's called a kittel, right? When you're all in white. I just remember him bowing down at one part of the service, like totally flat. You have to do that in one part of the service. And I don't know why that was like the first time I ever really
remember?
Yeah, acknowledged that, in my brain. Then when Rabbi Zawicka wasn't the rabbi of that synagogue, of the Hebrew home anymore, he became the rabbi of, I think it's Hevrei Lamdai Mishnayos. I think that was what it was called on Westbourne Parkway. So then we used to walk all the way from Colebrook Street all the way to Westbourne Parkway and go to the services there, which was also Orthodox. And then when I finally got married, my husband and his family were members of the Agudas Achim Synagogue when it moved to West Hartford, and Hartford for over 50 years. We got married there. And you also have to sit separate because it's an Orthodox synagogue. And all I remember is my son. I was very young when I got married. I had my son when I was 24. And I remember bringing him in the stroller. I was like the only person that had a baby too. And I brought him in a stroller and, babies fetch a little bit. And I just remember Rabbi Avrita giving me the eye, like, oh, get out of here because your baby's fetching a little bit, So back in those days, they weren't very welcoming of having children. And I do remember Leon, he probably doesn't remember me, but I remember your daughter running around the shul at the Agudas Achim, the one that's married to Rabbi Small. And I remember her running around and, Rabbi Avrita wasn't just he didn't like it. He married Marty and myself too. But then after, when my son got a little older and I said, I'm not going to schlep. We lived in Newington. I didn't want to schlep to Hebrew schools because it was 3 days a week to go to Agudas Achim in West Hartford. I said, forget it. Now we're just going to go to B'nai Shalom. It's a conservative synagogue in Newington. So we were the members of that synagogue for over 20 something years. And I can just remember one incident I was really super pissed off because I called myself Orthocon at that time. I was still more leaning towards orthodoxy and slowly breaking away to being a conservative person. But at the time, I will say, you're not supposed to say names, but I will say the name. Heather Fiedler used to belong to my synagogue with Rob. And Heather used to they couldn't afford to have a real cantor. So Heather kind of assumed the roles of cantor. And mind you, this is Rosh Hashanah, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and Rob takes a camera out. Back in those days, used to be very popular with the portable cameras. And he was taking pictures because his wife was up on the bima. And I was just so angry because how could you do that? It's, Erev Rosh Hashanah and you're taking a picture. So that just like blew my mind that he would do something like that. And then, so we belonged to that synagogue for many, many years. We lived pretty much right across the street from that synagogue in Newington. We moved to the other side of Newington, but then we joined Tikva. And because that synagogue was kind of falling apart, that was before it merged. And, we were members of that synagogue. And then we decided, okay, that kind of like was being merged and it was kind of falling apart a little bit in the beginning. Or like my husband really wanted to belong to a men's club. So we said, okay, my son finally had his bar mitzvah and my younger son. And we said, okay, let's just go to Emmanuel. So we've been there ever since, which is probably about 18 years or more. But it's just, then my father was in 13 concentration camps. I don't really have any family. My bubby came here from Russia. Her brother is Sam Goodman, who is one of the co-founders of the Emmanuel Synagogue. And but my family was Orthodox when I was growing up, and they just did not keep with a lot of their relatives. And so we never really had that experience of celebrating any holidays with relatives. We didn't really have any relatives. Like I said, my father's family was, all of his relatives were killed in the concentration camp. So when I moved to this house in Newington about 20 years ago, I decided that I was going to have an open house for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and it started with maybe 15 people. And then every year I started inviting more and more people from my synagogue. And luckily my house is pretty big. I have a very huge deck and I have a very big backyard, and it went up to like 60 people. And, you know, everybody keeps on asking me, well, what are you going to do this year? What are you going to do this year? Are you going to do your open house? And I'm like, no, because of COVID, you have to have people come in and use your bathroom. I really don't want that, you know? And I feel bad because, you know, there's so many other people in the same boat as myself that they don't have any place to go. So they used to come to my house and we used to have so much food. It was insane. And literally 60 people used to come to my house. A lot of people from Emmanuel Synagogue that didn't have anybody, you know, to share the second day of Rosh Hashanah with. So it's going to be really, really hard now because my older son lives in California and he won't come home because of COVID. And some of my husband's relatives used to come to my house for Rosh Hashanah, and we can't celebrate together just like everybody else. So we were thinking of just doing Zoom dinners for Rosh Hashanah. So, you know, it's just this whole COVID, you know, has put a really big wrench in everybody's life. And so I'm hoping that next year we'll all be in a better place and we can all share Rosh Hashanah once again together. So that's basically my spiel.
Thank you, Audrey. I think a lot of us are feeling the loss of connections with people this year, so definitely not alone.
I'm not sure you can hear me, Marge
Yes, I can hear.
Weingold. Oh,
Yeah.
I'd like to say a few words. I'd like to reinforce what Arthur said. I'm a Nassau before marriage, and my father was one of the brothers. And Arthur's mother did bring all of us together, and those memories I hold very, very dear. And I was married at the Temple Emmanuel, and the rabbi that married me had married my parents. That goes way back a long, long time ago. Unfortunately, my husband passed away a few years ago, but he felt very close to Arthur, who brought all the cousins together, and he knows how close I felt and do still feel to all the cousins, whether they lived in Hartford or Patterson or New York. They're very, very dear to me, those who we still communicate. And I admire the way Arthur has tried and has been successful in keeping us as a Nassau family together.
Thank you very much.
I would like to go back on the lighter side to Keeney Park, because that was a thing that's been in my mind since I was a child.
Amen.
Because all the teenagers, I would say, left the synagogues during the sermon. They didn't want to be there. So you had a mass of teenagers, 14 up. And it was just a big social gathering and talk. It was very quiet. They were very good. Nobody was rowdy. But as soon as the services got out, the numbers doubled in the park.
Yep.
You had baby carriages, couples. Everybody was just milling around. It was just a festive gathering. That's how I remember it. It was wonderful. You don't see anything like that today around here at all. Nothing. So I just wanted to bring that back because that was something that's been in my mind since a teenager.
And that's what everybody remembers when they talk about the north end of Hartford growing up, Keeney Park on Rosh Hashanah.
Somebody had mentioned the being in the overflow services at Weaver. Was that mostly like the teenagers would be there, or was that just anybody when the
I don't
synagogue
remember
was
that.
up?
That's what,
I don't know. Marty was talking about, I grew up at the Young Israel when it was still at the house across the street from Weaver on the corner of Westbourne Parkway and Canterbury Street. That's when the Young Israel was the Young Israel.
Okay, is there anybody else that was looking for a chance to share a story or a memory?
The Weaver congregation was basically young, but it also was the group that could not get into the Emmanuel.
I
And
see.
one of the things I remember coming from an Orthodox synagogue from the Agudas Achim, I was really shocked, but I adored the choir. It made the service so beautiful, but it was a little bit shocking because I had never, heard that before in an Orthodox synagogue. So the services at Weaver were very pleasant, very pleasant.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
I wonder if anyone has any memories. We've talked a little bit about food and family gatherings. Are there any special foods that people remember being associated with the holiday?
The only thing I could say, I'm sorry, the only thing I could say is along many years ago, my husband had one cousin before they retired and moved to Arizona. They used to have a Rosh Hashanah gathering at their house, and we went a couple of times, and they used to have a honey bar. And this woman used to collect honey from all over the place, wherever she went on a vacation. And then she would just lay them all out and with challah, and there would be all different kinds of tastings of different flavored honeys, which were really unique. And I kind of missed that. That was really fun. I mean, everybody has, apple cake and kugels and all of that stuff with brisket. It's all the same, tzimmus, some form of potato, whatever, but this was kind of unique because it was all different kinds of honeys that you just normally wouldn't have the opportunity to taste around here.
Wonderful, thank you.
One of the things that it reminds us of, who's lived in this community all this time, is how many synagogues there were and how few there are that have survived at this point in time. There were way more than that were even mentioned. I belong to one also in the West, in Hartford, on, I forgot the name of the street, actually. Anyway, my grandfather was one of the people that started it. Started about in 1945 or something like that. But there were many, many synagogues, the ones that haven't even been mentioned, that came up and have gone away since the time. But we had a lot of small synagogues and very few that exist at this point in time, unfortunately. But it's the nature of everything that's happened. It takes a lot for a congregation to survive financially, and a much greater diversity of services that they provide this day and age and are expected to, compared to what they did when we were growing up.
That reminds me of something that what he just said. I don't know why, but it just brought back this memory that in the olden days, instead of, like for the Yom Kippur appeal or asking people for donations for Rosh Hashanah, well, since I belong to an Orthodox synagogue, they would kind of like auction off the aliyahs.
Billing the aliyahs.
Yeah, auction off the aliyahs. And what they did was they handed everybody a card. And it had these little tabs on the card.
That's right.
A card. And it had these little tabs of dollar amounts and each on this card. And you would fold down the part that you
Up.
wanted to offer as a donation.
You fold them
So you
up.
could have an aliyah.
Never saw that at the Young Israel.
No, it was at the Hevrei Lamdei Mishnayos.
Which was initially on Bedford Street.
That was before my time, but yeah.
No, it was during my time. No, I went to the Garden Street Shul, which was the big one. And it was a long time before I was allowed to go for Kol Nidra. But and it was very, very awesome. And they were they were selling the aliyahs on both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I remember Mr. Hyman used to auction them off. Zum ersten Mul, zum zweiten Mul, und zum dritten Mul. And he gave a clap on the tish. That was with a balcony also. And I remember especially the Ansana Telkef, and I was still little then, but there was one lady.
Helga, is that you?
Yeah, it's me.
Helga? Oh,
Who's
for
that?
goodness sake, it's Barbara Gordon.
Barbara, I know, but I can't see you.
Oh,
I see
my
the
goodness.
telephone.
She's on the phone.
Recognize your voice. Yeah.
Wonderful. This is
And with Barbara, there's connection also.
Right. For heaven's sake, I recognize your voice.
I don't recognize it anymore.
Since
know
we're
what you
talking
mean,
about
yeah.
synagogues,
It's
I'm just taking the chance to show you this sort of online exhibit that that I've put together recently, and it sort of reinforces the point that Phil was just making about the number of synagogues that have existed over time in Hartford. And you can see the blue ones were ones that were created before, established before 1945, and they're all pretty much in the city of Hartford. And then the green dots are ones that were established after 1945, and you can see, that they've spread out around the region. So if you're interested, this is on our website, and you can just kind of scroll through and you'll see some photographs. They're sort of in order of when they were founded. And let's see, we were talking about Adas Israel and Agudas Achim on Greenfield Street. So you see those photographs there, and then you see it moving to West Hartford. So then there's also links within this to some of the rabbis, to information about some of the rabbis.
I think that was Garden Street that just passed by.
This is Hevrei Lamdei Mishnayos that Audrey was talking about.
That was on Bedford Street.
Yeah, and this is Beit
This is
HaMidrash
Garden Street.
on Garden Street.
Beit HaGadol or Havet Tzedek, yeah.
Right.
I went to Cheder there for 1 year. The only girl.
Great, yeah. So these are just a few of the photographs that we have in our collection, and this is the one in Westbourne Parkway, I think maybe Audrey was talking about.
Yes, that's it.
Right. And then the Emmanuel that was first on Windsor Street and then later on Greenfield Street. So all in all, just scrolling through that map will give you a overview of the kind of multiplication for a while of synagogues, and then contraction or consolidation that you've seen, and I think that we're seeing now. So across the region, and this also gets us a little out of Hartford into New Britain and Wethersfield and Manchester and so on. So I just wanted to share that with you and let you know that that's there.
A walk down memory lane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just in our last few minutes, is there anyone that was wanting to share something that hasn't had the chance?
The first one, does she still live on the kibbutz in Israel?
Wait, you're still with us, right?
Yes, I am still with you. Sadly, I don't live on the kibbutz. I live in West Hartford. Uh,
Oh, the
Yeah.
kibbutz of West Hartford.
well, I did create a little kibbutz here.
She did. I'm here to tell you.
Anything
Yeah.
you think of? No, about Rosh Hashanah?
I don't, what is your name, please? I don't think I've
My
ever
name
heard-
is my name is Noit. You want to think about
No, I mean, like-
not eating but misspelling. So it goes like Noeet. Noit.
That's different.
It is different. Even in
Yeah.
Israel, it's different. My parents got really creative when I was born.
So
A
I'm
good
here to tell you
creation.
that because Noit offered a sort of in-house Hebrew school to a number of children over the years, including my youngest daughter, that she did her best to recreate the kibbutz feeling at many of the holiday celebrations and opened her home to all of the families and provided us with a very large amount of food and appropriate blessings and discussions for the holidays. So I could see how that spirit of the kibbutz could be recreated, and in some ways is similar to what some of you have been remembering with your extended families, and the desire to connect around these holidays, I think, is very deep. So so in this year when perhaps we're not able to connect as much as we wish we could in person, I'm hoping that this evening was just a very small way of providing some of that connection and thinking about what these holidays really mean to us, even if we have to observe them in rather different and unfortunately more isolated ways.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I want to thank you so much for doing this. Many of us have not met you. You are new to Office of Executive Director.
Yes.
And from what I
Okay.
can see, you're doing a wonderful job. I just got a statement from your office, and it's the best that I've ever seen it. The layout and the logo and the descriptions of the various divisions of being able to be a member. It was just a wonderful job, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to being in person with you at some day in the future. Yeah.
Yes,
Beth, can
thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Yes,
guys.
thank you. Thank you
Beth, can I
very
add a
much.
word?
It was nice meeting everybody.
Thanks everybody
There
who
was a
spoke
lot
and
of-
everybody who came to listen. We appreciate it.
Shana Tova.
A lot
Bye.
of fun.
Beth?
שנה
Bye.
טובה
Bye.
ומתוקה. תודה רבה.
everybody.
שנה
Shana Tova,
טובה.
everybody.
Shana Tova.
Wonderful.
Shana
Hey,
Beth, can I
Tova.
add something?
Yes, please.
Hi, this is David Silver. I really enjoyed listening to everybody. We're not originally from Hartford, but we love being part of the community and going to the shuls. And I just want to say that where we live, we're off of the Trout Brook. We have a beautiful brook in our backyard. And for many years now, we've had Touchlicht in the back. And there was one year, maybe 5 years ago, where it was really, really raining hard. And we've had Touchlicht in all kinds of different weather. So I always tell people, whenever they feel like they've sinned, they can come throw bread in the brook. But it's a really pretty sight.
Hi, this is Hillary, and sometimes the fish eat it right away, and sometimes ducks eat it right away. So it's kind of funny.
And anyway, we loved listening to this and wish everybody a wonderful, sweet new year, maybe a better year, maybe an easier year.
אמן, אמן,
Thank
אמן.
you.
They throw
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, thank you so much for
Okay.
joining us, everybody.
Sure.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Okay.
We need
Hey, Arthur?
Bye bye.
They throw.
Thank you, Beth. It's really nice to see you. And
Arthur,
Nice to see you
I
too.
don't know if I'll ever come up to Hartford again. But
where's your,
if you ever
Arthur,
come to
where's your
Florida,
cousin Sybil?
I'm glad to see your face. I know your name associated with so many things. Marcia.
so
Hi, Marcia. Thanks for joining us. It's Lance. It's really
hi,
nice.
hi,
No
Lance.
eat. No eat. Are you still on?
I am still on.
No eat. Oh, well, I wanted to tell you, my granddaughter made Aliyah. She's living
Oh.
in Tel Aviv. So every day we FaceTime, and I take a walk through Tel Aviv. I go in all the restaurants. I do the shopping on FaceTime. I am so anxious to go back. Everyone is so wonderful.
You will go back. You will go
I'm
back.
going.
I have no doubt.
I just turned 85 and I'm going back.
Yes,
As
you
soon as I
are.
can.
Yes, you are. And maybe you
Yeah,
even
my
visit
grand-
in Kibbutz Yagur.
I would love to. My granddaughter actually brings other American kids back for Aliyah, and they're doing all right now.
Yeah,
Even though
yeah,
there's a
they are.
pandemic and they're closed down and all that, but the kids are coming. It's
Yes.
a wonderful, wonderful country. It's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes,
And-
and you're more than welcome to get my phone number from Elizabeth, and we can keep in touch. And
I would
really,
love
it's-
to. I would
it
love
would
to.
be
That's
my
great.
pleasure. It would be my
Yeah, I've
100%
got
pleasure.
a lot of stories to tell, right?
Oh, I
And-
love stories. I love
Oh,
stories.
yeah.
And
Well, I
let's
have
let's
some
remember
really
how
wonderful.
let's remember how historic today was. 2 peace treaties were signed. Let's hope that that will be a good
Those
thing.
aren't peace treaties.
Yeah, but
Well-
you know what? At the same time, Hamas sent
I know.
rockets today.
Right.
Well,
Can you believe
of
that?
Oh, it's a present.
Yeah.
But it was
So
his
That's what it
birthday.
is.
Gotta go. So goodbye, everyone.
No,
Shalom,
Okay.
shalom.
Bye-bye.
Shana
Shalom.
tova. Shana tova
Shana
v'metucha.
tova.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, Beth.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
It
Take
was
care.
wonderful.
Take good care.
Thank you. It was great.
Yes, well,
Be well.
okay.